Investors now have looked at that and said, even without those credits, these things still pencil. And some may say the credits are a bad thing, but the credits have also led to billions of dollars of private investment in the renewable energy field. So even though we've all contributed by paying our taxes, and I agree with you, I happen to be on the State Central Committee I'm from Michigan, and on the Michigan Republican Party, so I'm right there with you in terms of conservative values. And so if tax credits go away, then most places, their investors say, we can still do those. Our return on investment looks different, but they'll still be viable projects.
So what about catastrophic blade failure? I think there's one actually going on right now down by Edgeley, where they had a blade that, I don't know if it started with a fire, but they had a blade that disintegrated.
The old Edgeley wind farm west of Edgeley is dying. The turbines are shedding their blades, and the generators are bursting into flames.
I think you named it, the old Edgeley wind farm.
Yeah.
But there's also, this is going on in...
but it's going on in the newer farms also.
And, you know...
So who's responsible for cleaning up all the fiberglass? Because right now the setback from a property line is, I believe it was 1.1 times the height, is that correct? Mm-hmm. So that there being that close, so that's what, 600 feet, 660 feet. Well, now it's 700 feet tall, I guess. But this guy over here with those cattle, are they going to be forced to eat that fiberglass or that hay?
If we make a mess, we clean it up.
Is that guaranteed? Is that in writing?
It can be, absolutely. I mean, that can be part of our special aid. So one of the things that we want to do is we want to develop a project that benefits everybody, right? And we can argue about the definition of benefit, but one thing that I can tell you that should be part of the definition of benefit is that the local community shouldn't be paying anything for this at all. Okay, that would include cleanup in a situation like that. And so,
how about devalued properties? I mean, these don't bring people to the community.
So, what I will tell you is there are empirical studies done that show that when a project is announced, property values drop about 11%, and within 10 years, that comes all the way back to the current market value. So, once the projects are 10 years after construction, and in the packet that we'll leave you, there's a copy of this particular report. So they do.
I've also heard that if you can hear that noise, the chances of you selling that property is almost nil.
Well, this same report will show you that that's not the case, that property values return and that...
But the sound. How many houses have had to were bought out by wind companies due to infrasound and the sound and class action lawsuits coming out here and saying we can't take it no more? Because there are a lot of, they call it an annoyance factor out here. It's not direct, but it's an annoyance factor. And it creates all kinds of health issues. And there's people that can't sleep at night. They have all these issues. And how do you address that if someone does get hit with that?
Okay, this is a Wells County thing. So far, it's been totally dominated by Eddy County. I'd appreciate your comments, but way in the back.
Okay, well, Greg.
It is a Wells County guy.
Way in the back.
Okay, I'm Valhalla Township Chairman. So my question, we talk about all these setbacks, a mile, half mile, whatever. Can you define what the setbacks are? Is it from a person's residence, someone's house, someone's farm, someone's...
Well, there's a couple of different ones. One of them is from a structure,
Yes.
a building, an occupied building. And then there are setbacks from property lines of non-participating property owners. But what we're talking about specifically is from buildings, okay? This mile, half mile.
Okay, is this a building where someone lives, a building where they have machinery storage?
Yeah, where they live.
Or is this only where they live?
Yeah.
So the 1 mile setbacks are going to affect 2 towers. That's it. None in Valhalla Township.
That was my question. Of the existing potential footprint in Wells County, with the mile setback, how many towers are going to be
My
affected
township
in
will
your best
be
guess?
80. These guys live closest, and if they're at a mile, I think that's about where it is.
Well, when we drew it out, it covered all of the ones that are proposed locations. It covered all of them. So there may be other locations that we can move to, but the way we drew it out, it covered all of them.
But for the sake of this committee, this isn't, well, we're having a meeting because of the wind farm. We'd like to make this applicable to any future situations also. If they want to add on a year from now someplace else, if they're, you know, we can keep coming back, but this doesn't only apply to Bremen and Walhalla Township per se.
I
Yeah.
know Wells County, but you said that a mile would kill the project. I'm thinking, when you say that, you mean for the non-participants. Have you tried to negotiate with the non-participants? Because they are affected.
Well, sure they
Just
are.
like the landowner. The landowners get the perk. But that's where I think the problem is. So I think
So in part, I mean, again, I came onto this particular project later on in the process, but some non-participating landowners have been contacted, and they're non-participating because they chose to not participate, okay? And so that's their prerogative. And there are several that are like that.
So
Okay.
what's,
Okay, you're talking about the setback only occupied, okay? I live in Rockford. I grew up north of Bremen. I'm there every day. That's where I farm. I stay there. I got a house that I can live in. I stay out there in the spring, harvest, whatever. Okay, now you're saying that mile setback, somebody else 100 miles away, you're protecting them, but myself, I got a notice from a landlord 3 weeks ago that they're putting tower up on a quarter of land I farm, 2 towers. It's a quarter of a mile to the approach from my farmstead, and I don't count, but they are 100 and some miles away, and they have more rights than I do.
Well,
And
can't
I
speak to
hope
your
you as a
situation.
zoning board take that into consideration. Move it back, don't go closer than that mile. And not include people like us that farm out there. Maybe I don't live there full time, but I'm still there daily. I still am
That
there.
would be considered a resident.
He just said where you
Well,
live.
we're not knocking on all the doors to see if somebody lives there full time. If
A
it's a
mile?
house, it's an occupied residence.
A year ago, one of the people involved, I asked him about this, and he said, it doesn't concern you, there's nothing out in your area. Now, 3 weeks ago, I got informed that it's coming up there. I'm not against this, but why are all the lies? Why are all the secrecies?
Well, I can't speak to that. I don't know your situation. I can tell you we have never lied to anyone that I'm aware of.
Well, I can tell you who did.
Well, it's not me. And so if it was someone from our company, I apologize for that. And we haven't been secret either, okay? There's nothing that's been secret. We've had several landowner meetings, and we've been in the community, we've been donating to causes, and so we've been around. We haven't, to be honest, we haven't gone out of our way to upset people who don't need to be upset, but at the same time, we haven't been secretive about anything
Well,
either.
can we find out where the towers are then? I mean, does the ordinance does the setback come first, or does the towers come first? You said
Well,
that-
the setback obviously comes first, because we can't do anything that's in violation of whatever the zoning ends up being. So if it changes, then we have to change, our
maybe
layout.
where the towers are going will affect where the setback is.
No, it would be the other way around.
The other way
setback,
around.
That's where the towers are going.
The setback would affect where the towers are going.
It would
Jeff,
almost be disingenuous of us to say, hey, zoning board, here's our turbine layout. Can you construct the zoning ordinance so that your setbacks meet that's what you're asking. And that's not what we're doing. We're doing exactly the opposite. Decide what you're going to do, and then we'll work within it. And if it requires going for a variance, then that's what we'll do.
So you say at a mile, this will kill the project?
Without a variance, absolutely. No. At least in
Or
Wells
the few
County.
that are in Wells County will kill the whole project?
No, Wells County. It'll kill Wells County. If Eddie County ends up with a mile setback, yeah, we haven't
But
done
the
that
mile
analysis.
setback in Valhalla Township, the way you define it, will not affect any of the towers from the map that I received from one of your guys.
That's my question. So today, and I know this is a fluid situation, but as of today, your best educated guess between 12 and 15
Yeah, but where
towers
is the point?
in Wells County,
It's done.
a mile setback would affect how many residents?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how many residents. There's only.
Well, to say it's going to kill the project, I would hope you would know how many residents.
Well, I
it
don't.
affects.
I've seen the map. The map, when you draw it out from every residence, with a mile setback around every residence, every one of the towers that we had on our proposed map falls within if it's a red circle or whatever, like, it falls
Our map
under
that I
that.
have disagrees with.
Okay.
Kyle? Yeah, our maps disagree with that.
But I don't know if that map's right or not.
That's the whole thing, which map is right?
Well, none of the maps are right until, and I'll say it again, none of the maps are right until we get an approved permit. Everything is preliminary until we get an approved permit.
So,
The locations are changing all of the time as we learn different information from the various studies that we're doing, environmental assessments. We learn more things. It oftentimes has to shift locations. So those maps will change, I don't know, 100 times before a project's built.
There's one, right? Could be one. There's one or two residents that would be affected by those 12 or 15 towers.
Well, that might change a little bit if Greg's Farm is included.
So 3. So,
Well, there's one that's for sale also.
okay.
Is that affected or not?
We're still
It's a
not,
house.
we're still not at
It's a house.
50%. That's my point. We're not even at 50% yet, and to say it's gonna kill the project, I'm having a hard time wrapping my mind around how many percentage of the proposed towers do we need for it to succeed? If it's proposed for 120 towers, what is the break even? Where are we at? I don't know.
I would guess that's impossible to speculate.
Right now it is.
Without any variance or
Yeah.
anything.
Do you mean that to go, there are that many buildings with a mile setback that you can't figure out where to put your towers?
Now, granted, so, I guess I can backtrack a little bit. You know, we're looking at a map, and we're looking at buildings and trying to figure out which of these buildings qualify. So there could be some that, on a map, appear to be a residential type of structure and maybe aren't. So there may be a little bit of variance in that, okay? I'll give you that, because we didn't go out here and drive by every single structure that we can see on an aerial to see whether or not we will, I mean, absolutely. We will have a survey of the whole project area, and we will know every single structure, everywhere, maybe not every fence row, but every road, every pipeline, we'll have the whole thing surveyed. That's one of the requirements. And so then we'll know specifically. But that, as you can imagine, that's a huge expense to have the whole
Shouldn't have that
project
been
area
checked
surveyed.
out already, though?
Excuse me?
Shouldn't have that already been checked out?
It's part of the permit.
To
Sure.
find out all the residencies and stuff like that?
Well, we do these desktop reviews, and we pay to have desktop reviews done, and we do all this stuff. There's just a process to go through to get to all the different phases of a project, right? And we don't necessarily spend the hundreds of thousands of dollars to have the whole project surveyed unless we know that the chances are pretty good that we're going to build this thing, right? And so we spend a lot of money, our investors spend a lot of money in land acquisition. The phase that we just finished, we're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars now on all the different studies that we have to do. And then once we get these studies done, and we see that we've met all the conditions of these various studies, that Fish and Game and U.S. Fish and Wildlife and all these other agencies, then one of the next steps is to do that survey of the whole thing. So then we know specifically what are the buildings that we have to do the setbacks from, what is the setback, and then we make that final plan from there.
Question?
I wanted to let the train get by. I know you want to hear from Wells County people, but can I offer a little perspective since I've lived there and I've experienced some of this stuff, and maybe people on the zoning board haven't been living in the footprint? Would you grant me just a couple minutes?
Well, is this anything new from the last meeting?
Yes, this is.
Okay.
So, I know Lucas. I do, with PRC, I do not know the gentleman that's standing up there speaking. So, Lucas can verify that they were out surveying over in Eddy County and in Wells County. They were out looking for the survey markers in the road to figure out property lines and stuff like that. They had 2 vehicles with 3-man teams from Westwood Engineering out of Minnesota. They were driving around, they were surveying, they told us when we caught them trespassing on our private property that was electronically posted and metal sign posted. They wouldn't really identify themselves to us. They finally would after I got kind of rude with them. So there was some secretiveness going on there. Lucas can verify it. They were out there with the little mast with the GPS antenna on. They were doing all of this layout. They were marking out where roads were, they were marking out where power lines were and that type of stuff. That's why they said they were out in our standing crop, and they were supposedly operating for the power company, which they weren't because we called the power company. But, so they've been out, they've done the surveying, they've done that type of stuff already. They've also been out, you talk about the desktop survey, whatever, look at the map. They were out flying with a helicopter that was based out of Minot, and they flew over my calving pasture so low when we were taking calves, I could have hit them with a baseball. So you can't tell me that they haven't been out there seeing what's out there, and you say you want to be a community member. Being a community member is more than throwing some dollars at a 4-H raffle or sponsoring a shoot at a rodeo or anything else. Being a community member is knowing who your neighbors are. Going and meeting them. You might not get a warm welcome. Lucas and Alex, I don't know if you replaced Alex or not. Lucas and Alex, they called up. They came over to the shop. They had 6 caramel rolls. They said we could have 2 because they had to bring the other 4 over to the Wells County Courthouse. We stood in the shop and we
Boone
visited.
had 3 of them.
You had 3?
Boone did.
Boone did. Well, it looks like it. Sorry, Boone.
You can sit down.
Okay. What I'm getting at, though, is that there's been surveying done. They've been flying with the helicopter looking for eagles' nests. They've been doing all this other stuff. If you can't tell me where the inhabited houses are in the community you want to do business, you need to do better business.
Amen.
Amen.
I appreciate that, and you're right, there is a lot of surveys or work that has been done, but not all of it has been done yet, and we're just in that process. And quite frankly, if this meeting wasn't going on now, we would be working under the assumption that if there wasn't a proposal to change the ordinance, we would be working under the assumption of the current ordinance and probably would be moving into that final round of surveying pretty quickly. So yeah, I mean, you're right. There's corner surveys that have been done. There's road intersection surveys that have been done. There's the helicopter flights are for eagle and raptor nest surveys. And there's been grouse studies, all sorts of studies, right? Bad acoustic monitoring, tons of stuff that's been done. But there's a process for all of that, right? This hearing here, because of what they're proposing, has kind of brought this a little bit higher up in the priority list. So normally this survey that we would be doing to determine where all these occupied structures are, or those that are prone to be occupied or able to be occupied, would be a little bit later in the process normally. But here we are, right? And so with the information that we have right now, trying to answer these questions as best we can.
Okay. Any other comments or questions?
Can I just make a short one? So you talked about community meetings, and do you know that it's only the landowners that are in the project and none of the rest of us know about them? They used to have them in New Rockford, and now I hear they moved them to Carrington so we don't accidentally walk into the Eagles. I was just wondering why we just don't invite everyone?
The next one's at a golf course in New Rockford, right? Yeah. So it's not at the Eagles, it's at a golf course. What the name of the golf course? Rockford Golf Course.
When is that scheduled?
Another question?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I'm wondering about the transmission lines, how many kilowatts these towers put out, and has anybody talked to the power companies, are they going to, profit, or are they going to get, power from these wind turbines? Because years ago, we were trying to get off-peak power from Otter Tail for our church, and I asked the Otter Tail individual, I said, what about wind towers and stuff? Aren't those things, renewable energies? And that he said, none of that's reliable. So we have to keep coal power and reliable power. So the power you're putting in with these wind turbines, it's not reliable. And they have to still create electricity that is reliable from coal or gas or steam or whatever. And so, what's this green, it seems like it's, I don't know, just doesn't seem to me.
I mean, obviously I can't speak to what that guy said, but you're talking to a company who has as part of their...
Otter Tail?
Yeah, no, I know Otter Tail, and what that individual said, but you're talking about a company now who is working with several renewable energy companies to have renewable energy as part of their production portfolio. So an individual who says it's not reliable is working for a company who is acquiring renewable energy projects as part of their energy production portfolio. So I'll let that speak for...
Yeah, it speaks for subsidies, is what that speaks for.
Anything else? Cheryl?
My question is, no matter, I've heard, no matter what this committee comes up with a proposal, it comes down to the commissioners that we have that vote.
Correct.
And they may listen to the proposal and they may throw out the whole proposal. Now, if you decide to go with not this proposal, but so that they come in, what you're saying is then the townships that are involved can still opt out to have this happen? Is that the...
Any township that is signed on with the county zoning ordinances at any time have the right to decide to go on their own and create their own set of zoning ordinances.
Okay.
And
So-
give or take, there's probably 30 of the 36 townships.
I think, yeah, there's, I think 4 that don't have any ordinances, 3 or 4 that have their own, all the rest are with the county.
So bottom line is the commissioners, if the townships decide, then they can not go by what the commissioners have said.
What the county has said. They can do their own zoning. Stan, I don't want to try to be negative here, but I listened to the last county commissioner meeting, and they talked about these back sets, and you made reference that 15 people showed up and they convinced you into doing a mile back set or whatever. You also said that ain't happening. You said there's no way that's happening. Why are we having this meeting today? You as a county commissioner would make a statement like that. I find that really non-productive. I think you know what I'm referring to. I'm sorry?
I think I misquoted. Did I say
No, it's on video. It's on video, Stan.
That being said, when last we met, there was plenty of conversation about the noise, which you've addressed that. I think property owners versus non-property owners, we're never going to make a perfect world out of that. Aesthetics was brought up. Obviously, if you don't like looking at them, it isn't going to make any difference if it's a half mile, a mile, or 8 miles. You will see them regardless.
Oh, there's a big difference in height. Like I said, Stan, look at this tower out here. Double that cell tower.
I know. You can't drive in the state of North Dakota without coming across wind farms. The one north of Rugby, I can see at night as soon as I leave Rolla. How far away is that? That's 40 miles.
Yeah, but how about if it's in your backyard?
I know. I understand that, but whether it's a half mile away, 3/4 of a mile away, or 6 miles away, you're going to deal with it. And
The impact is less, though.
I think that was my point at the meeting. If you're adamantly opposed against wind farms, a mile ain't going to help. Obviously, I'm in the camp that 1250, the current one right now, is too close. Okay. But if you're against it, and you're looking out your window, a half mile's too close, a mile's too close, and like Dan said, 10 miles is too close. So by making this longer, are we helping anybody?
Safety and noise. Those are the biggest ones, and infrasound.
If I'm on my way to Bismarck, I don't know how many towers are in that Wilton area, but it's got to be 100. You can see them from 20 miles away.
But you're not living in it.
I know that, okay? Not arguing with that, but from an aesthetics and those types of things, it won't matter what the setback is. So if the design here is, and I don't know where, I've not seen a map, haven't looked at a map, I asked the question. And somebody else responded to it and suggested that a mile will kill the project. So if that's what the intent is, then I guess we're on the right track.
It's not the intent.
But, okay, so, you gotta be at least open-minded to the fact that a letter was read here, somebody does want them.
They don't even live here.
North Dakota, somebody must want them because
they don't even
they're
live
there.
here.
Grandfield Township though, they got a mile setback, where that letter come from.
So,
Jeff?
To Dan's point, just to be open-minded and offer a suggestion, if you go back to the half-mile setback, a lot of these good neighbor contracts and these other things do not enter into the equation. So then you do not have that ability for the wind farm to come talk to the local landowner. I just want you to be open-minded and consider that. That is one thing with that mile setback All these other things enter into the equation. If you make that setback too narrow, that doesn't happen. So to address that, that's the difference there.
Yep, and so I appreciated you guys hearing, or saying that based on what you thought this was, that a mile wouldn't necessarily do great damage to this. But it would be nice to hear what you could live with also.
A mile, we're saying a mile.
But it sounds to me like you're willing to, okay, so maybe it's you personally I should be asking, or citizen X personally, what can you live with?
The conversations I've had, they can live with a mile with a variance. So let that conversation happen at the local level, not have it happen in this room. That's all I'm asking. Let that conversation happen on the local level. If you make that setback too narrow, that conversation will never happen. Let the locals have it. That's all I'm asking.
Well, with what Jeff said is, my phone's been ringing and it hasn't been anybody wanting it at a half mile. I mean,
I'll second that. I'll change my opinion if I get one phone call that says I'm wrong.
but I'm not, I don't take it as I'm anti-wind. I just have questions. I'd love to see the extra revenue and everything else. But to serve our township right, I gotta listen to the people that are in the township. Some of them are in the room. They say a mile is what they can live with. So that, if it doesn't do it on the county level, what am I supposed to do at the township level? Because we do have our zoning. So we're gonna have a hearing and we'll go through all the same stuff. And if they come in and the majority says we want it at a half mile or a quarter mile, or we can't do a quarter mile, but if we want to go with what the state is or what the county is, or if we want to go further back, am I not supposed to listen to them? How am I supposed to proceed with them? So you say it'll kill the project, but what stops you from going out and getting a variance from these area people?
Well, nothing stops us from requesting a variance. But again, requesting a variance, it doesn't mean we fill out the form and we get it.
Right, but you were quick to say that it'll kill the project, not it'll create extra work in your
A mile setback will. If we're stuck at a mile setback, it will. If we
How
get a
many
variance, then the whole
how many
conversation
farms,
can move.
how many farms is it gonna affect in Walhalla Township? Most of these in Wells County are in Walhalla Township. So can you tell me how many farms it's gonna
I can't
affect?
off the top of my head, no. I'd be happy to get back with you for sure.
It's a bold statement.
If you say that Greg's Farm's involved, it'll affect two towers? Because the one farm that's out there, that guy, he's participating. I'm certain Bob would be fine with it, but I can't speak for him, but I don't think it would kill the problem.
Well, like I said, I'd be happy to follow up with you. We can exchange it, contact
Yeah,
information.
Lucas has my information
Yeah,
and stuff.
okay. And I'll give you my card too before you come.
So with the mile setback, what's stopping you from reconfiguring your,
Well, one, that's
Sure.
what we would have to do, but based on the maps that we've drawn and the land that we have leased, the mile
because there can't
setback.
be that many people living that close together that you can't
Well,
put,
there's not a whole lot of houses out
that
there
you
now.
can't put a tower a mile away from the
Well,
house.
true, but you also have to recall that we don't have,
You gotta go by the lay of the land, I
well,
realize
yeah, and we don't
that.
have like the whole township leased. You know, it would be a different discussion if everybody signed a lease and the whole township was participating, you know, then we'd have a lot more potential locations to put turbines, but we have to deal with the people that signed leases, and those obviously are the only places where we can put any infrastructure, is those who have said, yeah, you know.
got more than some trips.
Well, yeah, but still, we're only dealing with the landowners who have signed leases, and that's the only land that we can use, right? So, it doesn't matter how much acreage there might be in the entire township, it's only those that have signed leases to participate with us.
I believe we have a motion and a second for us.
Yes, we do. This is in the
I'm gonna
discussion
call-
phase.
I'm going to call for a vote, and I'm going to call for a roll call vote. I have the right to do that.
That stops any other discussion.
I guess if they want to keep discussing, but I think...
I'm done.
I don't mean out there, but within
Okay.
the board now. I've gotten phone calls, I'm assuming you've gotten phone calls, Jana has sent a packet of stuff. We've looked at Martin County stuff, we've looked at different counties. Any other input? You know, here's my take on it. This is one of the toughest situations. it's a balancing act. Like somebody said in the last meeting, you want to keep everybody happy. And
You can't.
it's difficult